Hi, I'm Darla Six. I'm the Title I reading teacher at McEwen Elementary, and our goal for this video is to walk through the procedures for preparing, administering, and scoring a DRA2 assessment. We use the data from the DRA in Harrisonville to identify our students' independent levels, and we use the information that we gather to help make instructional decisions for each student in order to get them the tools and the strategies they need to move up to the next level. I encourage you to become familiar with the teacher guides because they contain the information on the rationale of all the aspects of the DRA. And there are also specific guidelines and directions for you so that you can become proficient in administering the DRA. Begin by checking to make sure that you have all the forms and the items necessary that you will need for the assessments for each child. You'll most likely need multiple copies of test booklets and test forms for your grade level, and possibly a few below your grade level and a few above. You'll need to review or learn how to take a running record. You can talk to teachers in your grade level, you can use your teacher's guide, and there's also a laminated card in your box that will be of assistance to you. Read all the benchmark books that you're going to be using. This is important in order for you to support your students and to make good evaluations on their levels of comprehension. Get with your mentor or your colleagues to determine the timeline that you're going to use in order to complete all the DRA2 assessments in your classroom. As a part of your ongoing instruction, you're going to want to model and have the students practice retelling familiar stories or writing retells on paper. Share with the students what they're going to be asked to do during a DRA. These instructional practices should occur all year long, not just a week or two before the DRA, because if we expect the students to be able to do these skills, we need to give them time for you to model, to see you model, for guided practice and for independent practice. You'll be giving an independent student reading survey to the kids. You'll engage in conversation with them about their reading choices and their reading habits. The survey is found on actual test pages. You'll record the student responses. For levels 28 or higher, the students can record their own responses as you engage in conversation, or they can do it independently. Be sure to note any reading behaviors that they mention to you, because all of this input will help you get to know your students better and help you in helping them select appropriate texts for their independent reading. So you're ready to begin selecting the text that you're going to use with your students. It's important for the students to select the just right text for them so that their attention can be focused primarily on making meaning and not stopping and struggling with decoding. Look back over any previous teacher notes that you've been provided, or pick up their DRA folder and look at past DRAs that they have completed. Your teacher's guide also provides information for you that will help you make decisions on where to begin testing with your students. Also consider assessing both fiction and nonfiction text. Now, after you've laid out several texts that you believe are appropriate selections for your students, invite the student to choose what they're going to read. You'll read aloud the introduction for the text as it appears on the teacher observation guide, and then the student will read the designated portion of the text. If you're using a level 14 or higher, you will time the student's oral reading rate. For all levels, you need to capture as many reading behaviors as you can. That includes catching miscues, substitutions, rereading, sounding out, self-corrections, phrasing, fluency notes, expression, how they read punctuation, and as well what they do when they hit a point of difficulty. It's a lot, but the more you take running records, the more proficient you're going to become at capturing all those behaviors. If a student's reading rate falls in a shaded area in either the words per minute or the percent of accuracy, you're going to want to stop the assessment and take the student down to a lower level. If the student is independent or advanced in the words per minute or accuracy, you may continue. I'm working with a 3rd grade student, Kale. He and I met a couple of days ago, and we engaged in a conversation about his reading habits and what he enjoys reading. I learned that Kale loves to read books that have boy characters and are very humorous. He's currently reading a Fudgemania book by Judy Blume. He usually reads something different at night, but he does regularly engage in conversation with his parents about what he's reading at school. He shared he does several things well as he reads. He says he's good at stopping at periods. He goes back and looks again if he doesn't understand something. And he says he can often see pictures in his head while he's reading a story. I noted on the page that I would suggest he try some different genres of text to maybe find some other types of books that he would enjoy. All right, Kale. Nice to see you again. And you said Fudgemania is going well. Kind of funny. Can you tell me one funny thing that Fudge has done since I saw you on Tuesday?
He's just not letting. He keeps counting his Cheerios in the morning because he counts to like 200 Cheerios, and once he gets 200, he just eats them all.
Does Peter not like him doing that, his older brother?
It's annoying.
Annoying. I have a feeling Fudge is going to be very annoying in all those books. Well, after you told me that you liked reading boy humor books, I went back and looked at some of the selections I had, and I picked out a couple that I thought you might want to read, and then I also picked out a couple of nonfiction books. I know you said you didn't read those very often, but I just wanted to give you that choice. So looking at these titles, we've got All the Way Under, A Pack of Wolves, A Journey to Freedom, and The Amazing Octopus. So looking at the covers and the titles, pick up a book, maybe just open it to the front page and just kind of look at the text to see if it's something you might think you would enjoy reading for me. And if you don't like it, pick another one. Okay? So you get to choose. While Kale's looking at these books, I'll let you know that I pulled his DRA folder from the end of his 2nd grade year and looked at what he had read last year, and he finished the year last year independently at a level 38. So I have chosen all level 40 books for him to choose from today.
This one.
You're going to go with The Amazing Octopus. Okay. All right, Kale. So what you chose today was a nonfiction text. It's an informational text, and it's called The Amazing Octopus. And it's going to tell some interesting facts about the octopus. And so I'm going to have you to read aloud to the star on page 2. Okay? So let me give you a quick look here. Oh, you just have to read one page out loud to me today.
Okay.
Lucky you.
So read all the way to here.
Right there. Okay?
Deep in the ocean lives a creature known for its tricks. It can get out of the tightest places. It can change its shapes and its color in less than a second. This creature is cold-blooded and is called an octopus. More than 150 kinds of octopus can be found around the world. The smallest is the size of a thumb. The biggest is more than 20 feet from arm tip to arm tip. An octopus has no backbone. It has a body shaped like a balloon that is covered by a mantle. It has 8 arms. Each arm has rows of suckers. Most kinds of octopus have about 2,000 suckers. These suckers help an octopus to pick up and eat food. They also help it to cling to a hiding place. Octopus arms are always busy. They use their arms to crawl, dig, and eat. An octopus has 2 eyes. It can turn its eyes in half circles without moving its head. Its eyesight is very sharp. An octopus uses gills and a funnel for breathing. Its funnel also helps the octopus move through water.
All right, Kale. Hang on just a second while I go back and look at a few things. Okay. I'm going to have you make some predictions about this, about what you've just read, okay? And I'm not going to have you use the text while you're using it, okay? All right. So, what questions did you have in your mind, if you had any, of what you were thinking when you were reading the first part of the text about these octopus? Did any questions pop up in your mind?
Like, how do they, like, eat their prey exactly? What do they use for, like, camouflage so they can't be seen by their prey?
Camouflage.
How much do they, like, weigh? And
So, what do you think you might learn from reading the rest of this book about octopus?
how they find their prey and kill their prey, and all the body parts they have on them. And a lot of just...
So how they find their prey, how they kill their prey.
And body parts.
I had 3 spaces and you filled up all 3. So that will work. Okay? All right, so what you're going to do now, Kel, is you're going to finish reading the book. Okay? And when you're finished, you're going to write a summary of what you've read. And you're going to answer some questions on a piece of paper that I'm going to give you. Okay? So you can go ahead and we're going to find you a quiet place to complete reading your book. All right.
Yeah, and already asked you about who you read with and things like that, so we're all set to read this book, right? And this book is called The Lost Book. And in this story, The Lost Book, it's time to take the books back to the library, and one book is missing. And the teacher and children need to find that lost book. So look at the pictures and tell me what's happening in this story.
Do I read it?
Just look at the pictures now and tell me what you see happening.
It looks like they're at the library or in the classroom with a lot of books and they're reading.
Okay, and then just go on to the next picture and tell me what's happening.
The teacher's talking about this stack of books. And then they find a bug where I think they left their book and now they can't find the book. They start looking for the book and they look under everything. They look in their backpacks and then they find one book. And that's the end.
Okay, now read to find out where the children look for the lost book.
It was Tim to take the books back to the library. We had 10 books, said the teacher, but no, we have need. We must find the books, the lost books. 2 boys looked under the rug. They found one black bug and one penny, but no book. 2 girls looked behind a book corner. They found a yellow ball and some blocks, but no book. A boy and a girl looked in their backpacks. They found no book. The teacher looked under some papers. No, said hid behind. I found it. Here, said.
I think we'll stop right there and maybe read a different book. I've got Time to Play. Now, you said you might have read this last year. Looked kind of familiar to you?
Kinda.
Okay. This is called Time to Play, and in this story, Pam and Lee like to play after school, but they often have different things to do. So look at all the pictures and tell me what's happening in this story.
They like to play at school. Then he had art class after school, so they couldn't play. And then Pam had to go to her grandma's house, so she couldn't play. And then he had to go to the store, and he couldn't play. And then she had soccer practice, so she couldn't play. And then they finally could play together.
Is that the end of it?
Yeah. Lee and Pam like to play after school, but on Monday Lee went to art class after school. No time to play with Pam, he said. On Tuesday, Pam went to Grandma's house after school. No time to play with Lee, she said. On Wednesday, Lee went to the store. What Lee said, Mom. On Thursday, Pat had a soccer game. On Friday, Pam and Lee had time to play. They had fun.
All right. Now, this one I'm going to let you retell it for us, okay? Tell me what happened. Get my paper ready. Okay, close it up. Now start at the beginning and tell me what happened in this story. We're going to leave the book closed. Use your memory and think about what happened at the beginning.
They had no time to play, and then one time, Lee had art class, and then after that, Pam went to Grandma's, and then Lee went to the store, and then Pam went to go see Grandma, and then they had time to play.
Okay. What part did you like best in this story?
Probably the time where they got to play,
Okay. Why did you like that part best?
because I like playing.
Did this make you think of anything, a connection you can make to this story?
I like to play soccer too.
Great reading. I didn't know we'd get to read two. You got your 2 books. Thanks for coming down.
All right, we're back, and Cale has finished reading his text The Amazing Octopus. And I just wanted to share with you a little bit. If a student is reading in levels 4 through 24, the student will orally retell the story to you. And on your teacher observation sheet, you will underline as close as possible details and events that the child mentions. And be sure if you prompt the child any that you tally how many times you prompt them in their retelling. At levels 28 and higher, which is where Kale fell today, the student will record their own writing in their student booklet, unless otherwise stated in a 504 IEP and that you need to do the writing for them. You may read the questions to them, just what is there, no additional instruction or paraphrasing. And the student, if it's a nonfiction text, and sometimes fiction text, the student can actually use their book to help them answer the questions. Again, I encourage you to use your teacher guide because it has a wealth of information that's going to help you with your scoring. So if you have your teacher guide with you today, The Amazing Octopus, the examples begin on page 114, so you can flip to that and follow along. When Kale finished reading out loud, what I had to quickly do, well, as he was reading, I quickly took my running records and any notes that I made along the way. I noted, in addition to any self-corrections or errors that he had, that he really didn't use a lot of intonation when he was reading. He was pretty expressionless, didn't have a lot of the raising or falling of his voice any. And I also noted down at the bottom that he doesn't consistently stop at periods. I don't know if you noticed that, but that'll be something that we're going to want to address. He read the section in 1 minute and 50 seconds. So I quickly flipped over to the back and noticed that it fell in this independent range, so I could circle that. And then I had to quickly go back and count for errors. And he only had 2. So both of those fell in the independent range, signaling to me that he was ready to continue on with the story and then follow up with his writing. So you heard me give him the directions to finish reading. We went to a quiet place where he could do that and then complete all of the writing. Once he finished reading, he asked me, as I gave him his student booklet, I read to him the directions, which is totally permissible, but you just read exactly what's there. Write a summary of this book in your own words. Include the important ideas and facts from each section. You may use the book to help you write your summary. And he asked me, he said, does that mean I have to write 1 sentence from each section? So I just reread the directions again. I couldn't answer that specifically on how many sentences I expected because that is something that should have already been covered in instruction when teaching children how to write summaries and retells. So I read the directions with him again. He opened the book and he started writing. All right, to begin scoring Kale's DRA, you of course are going to need your DRA2 continuum. And again, if you don't have an actual copy of this in front of you, you can go to your Blackline Masters and find The Amazing Octopus. And it's on page 280 is where the continuum is. So the first thing is reading engagement. So we want to take a look at that and score which section we feel Kale falls into. First is wide reading, and so I have his survey with me here, and I always start in the 3s. What would it take for Kale to be independent? And it says a 3 is writing down at least 4 titles from 2 to 3 genres or multiple books from 1 genre, generally on grade level texts. Well, Kale mentioned mostly that he liked reading boy humor books, that he really wasn't totally interested in mysteries or sports, but he'd read a few. He said, I like to hunt, but I'm really not into hunting books. I like baseball, football, swimming, and dirt bikes, but I really don't read books about them. But he mentioned several titles. In fact, he's got 4 titles on his reading survey from 1 genre of the humorous books. So to me, I'm going to give him a 3 that he's independent in his wide reading. Then the next section says self-assessment and goal setting. And to be a 3, it says at least 1 specific strength and goal related to the reading process and a relevant plan. Well, when Kale and I were visiting, he really couldn't think of anything that he wanted to work on to become a better reader. So since he doesn't mention a goal, I'm just going to automatically take him down to the instructional level of a 2. And that's something that he and I would visit about in a conference. What would be something, a plan we can put together to maybe expose you to some different genres of books. So after we've done that, then the next section on the continuum is the oral reading fluency. And the first section is expression. So to be a 3, Kale would have to have expression emphasizing key phrases and words at times. I really noted on my running record that he didn't use a lot of intonation. He didn't have a lot of inflection in his voice. It was a nonfiction text, so there's not going to be a ton of expression, but I would expect some inflection. So instructional is some expression that conveys meaning, and intervention is monotone, very little expression. I just don't feel comfortable with it being monotone. It was a nonfiction text, so I'm going to go ahead and mark him as instructional in his expression. I haven't heard him read fiction text, so that's going to be something I'm going to want to do when I confer with him to see if he switches gears a little bit when he gets into where maybe there is some conversation in a book. The next section is phrasing. To be a 3, it says generally appropriate pauses, heeds most punctuation, longer meaningful phrases most of the time. Yeah, I would say he heeds most punctuation. I noticed on my running record as I went back and looked at it that I circled periods when he just totally skipped right over them and just trucked right on through to the next sentence. But it doesn't say that it heeds all punctuation. Instructional says inappropriate pauses or shorter phrases. He really didn't read in a lot of short phrases. He did a very nice job of stretching it out. So I'm comfortable marking him independent in his phrasing. The rate is really cut and dry. You're just going to go back on your page and look where you figured the rate. It is 189 words divided by the total seconds. Multiplied by 60, and that's 103 words per minute. So when I come back, independent is 100 to 135 words per minute, so that's what he is. So I circle the 3, and I always write the words per minute in here so that if I'm talking with the teacher, I have it right there. And then his accuracy, when you go back and look at that, he only had 2 miscues, which makes him a 99%, and his accuracy, which is advanced. So we add up the reading engagement scores, and he's a 5. We add up his oral reading fluency scores, 6 and 4 is 10, plus 2 is 12. So he's independent in his oral reading fluency. Now we're ready to move on to his comprehension. Here's the summary that Gage wrote. When I read the directions to him, write a summary of this book in your own words. Include the important ideas and facts from each section. You may use the book to help you write your summary, which he did do. He opened the book up and perused through it. He did ask me, he said, Miss Six, do I have to write one sentence for each section? I can't really give him more specific directions than what is in the test booklet. So again, I just reread, include important facts, and you'll notice I underlined it for him to draw his attention to it. And he kind of had this frustrated look on his face, like, okay, you really didn't answer my question, but this is an assessment opportunity, not an instructional one. So I said, just do the best you can, Kale. And he jumped right in. I'll read his summary to you. Octopuses have a lot of suckers. It shoots poison into its prey, such as crabs and shrimp. Octopuses make dens. Octopuses make their babies go out of the den after they hatch. Octopuses are food. So if we come down to the comprehension section on your DRA2 continuum and we look at summary, again, I always start at a 3. So is the summary in his own language? Does it include many important ideas, some vocabulary, and supporting facts from each section? This is where it really takes you a little bit of time to study what would be appropriate to be considered independent at this level. If you have your teacher guide with you, Amazing Octopus, the sample begins on page 114. And I always go back and look at that just to help me get a firm grip of maybe what is expected. Summary in unknown language includes many important ideas. It's the word many that I'm getting hung up on because to me this is a pretty short summary for an above grade level reader. So I was wondering, I thought, what did he write last spring on his 38? I went back into his DRA folder and I pulled out his summary from last spring. And what I noticed is on the 38, they gave little headings to help Cale organize his writing. And I wondered, that's quite a jump when you go into the 40 and the headings have disappeared. So I thought this is going to be a teaching point probably in my conferences with his writing of retells and summaries, that he might need a little bit of guidance in how many important ideas and facts from each section to include. And then also I need to be aware, as I stated, when you go back and read, that you should read all the books. There are 5 different sections in the book. So I need to look and see, does he have important ideas and facts from the 5 different sections? I'm familiar enough with the text that I know he's got 1 from each section. So again, many important ideas, supporting facts from each section. I feel like this is an area that Cale could use some additional instruction in to make him stronger. So I'm going to go ahead and mark him as instructional at a 40. It is above grade level, so I'm confident with that. He doesn't have any misinterpretations, and that's okay. It may not meet everything, but it's some important facts and ideas that he's included. Let's go back up to where it says questioning and predictions. After Cale had done his oral reading for me, I asked him to make some predictions. What questions did you have as you were reading the first part of this text? And you heard him say, how do they eat their prey exactly? What do they use as camouflage so they aren't seen by their prey? And how much do they weigh? Again, in your teacher's guide, you can flip to page 114, and there's a section there that can guide you as what is an independent descriptor. Independent is at least 2 reasonable questions and predictions that go beyond the text read aloud. Well, he's got 3 predictions, and I would say that they are very reasonable. Then, what do you think you will learn from reading the rest of the text? How they will find their prey, how they will kill their prey, and their body parts. So now the decision becomes, is he independent in his questioning and predictions? Is he a 3 or is he advanced? Because he had 3 thoughtful questions and predictions that went beyond the text read aloud. Since he has 3 on both of them, I feel very confident of marking him as advanced in his questioning and predictions. The next part in the student booklet is the literal comprehension. Again, I read the questions to him just to make sure he understood. List 3 facts about an octopus. Again, he could use his book. And there's a box, and there are 3 lines for the 3 facts. He wrote, they have no bones, they can change colors, females die for their babies. So a 3 is information from the text that accurately responds to questions or prompts. To be advanced, all important information from the text that effectively responds to questions or prompts. So you have to ask yourself here, accurately, effectively, what's the difference? Page 115 in your teacher's guide will guide you and help you make that decision. I am going to go with he's independent. He accurately responded to the questions. All right, so now we're ready to talk about Cale's interpretation. What do you think would happen if there were no octopus predators in the ocean? And he wrote, the ocean would be filled with octopuses. Well, to be an independent descriptor, it says he has to understand the important text implication. We'd be overrun with octopuses in the ocean. And he has to give a relevant supporting detail, which is missing. So I'm going to go back and look at the 2, which is a partial understanding of important text implication, little or no detail. Since he didn't provide evidence of why the octopuses would fill the ocean, why there would be so many of them. That's something that he needs a little assistance with on how to provide text evidence in his answer. So I'm going to go ahead and mark him as a 2, instructional for interpretation. Now comes the 2 hard ones. These are really hard for kids, and they're hard for teachers too, as we are trying to teach kids how to answer these questions. And that's the reflection one. What do you think is the most important thing about octopuses? Well, they're asking the child's opinion. So what Kale thinks is that they decompose. I wondered why he wrote that. So in the reflection, a 3, a significant message or information and a relevant reason for his opinion. In your teacher guide for independent, it says they would use tricks to survive. They want to live, so they use their tricks like shooting water to stop them trying to eat them. See where this gets a little dicey right here? What do you think is the most important thing about octopuses? That they decompose. Before I mark it, I'm going to go on to the next part. Tell why you think this is important. I want to see if it sheds any light on why he wrote his first sentence there. Because if they didn't decompose, the whole world would be filled with them. There's your reason right there. So under reflection, significant message or information and a relevant reason. Well, I don't know if it's significant, but it is some information, and he does give a reason. Again, 2, 3, I'm not going with a 4 because I don't see any higher level thinking really occurring here, but I'm comfortable marking him a 3. Independent on his reflection. Then the metacognitive awareness on the back. Check one strategy that you use to help you understand this text. And he read them and he looked at me and he said, I don't quite get it. And I said, well, it's not a teaching moment. I can't tell him what metacognitive awareness is. I just said, check one strategy that you use to help you understand the text, just rereading exactly what's on the student booklet. And he looked at it and he thought, and then he made a teeny tiny check mark next to I made connections. So then I went on and I instructed him, I said, give at least 2 specific examples from this book that show you how you use this comprehension strategy. And here's what Kale wrote. Because if they didn't decompose, the whole world would be filled with them. When I was in science, I learned if nothing decomposed, the whole world would be filled with dead stuff. God, I love that. Because what it's telling me there is that Kale is taking information that he learned in a whole nother content area in his science class, and he's taking that and he's transferring it into a reading text. I learned that if things don't decompose, we're going to have this huge buildup of all this dead stuff laying around. So he made a connection to his science instruction. Now, is it 2 specific examples from the book? That's what we've got to look at. So when we go to our DRA2 continuum and we look at independent, it says at least one specific example from the text related to the identified strategy may include details. From the text. Here's what I'm going to tell you about this one. I'm not quite sure if it's exactly from the text that if things didn't decompose, the whole world's going to fill up with dead stuff, but it did come from text in his science, and the fact that he transferred that information to me is pretty remarkable as a thinker, and so I'm very comfortable marking him as a 3 independent with his metacognitive awareness. But again, that is something that we will probably talk about when I have some conferences with them and I'm teaching him how to make additional connections in nonfiction or fiction stories. So now we can add up the comprehension portion of the continuum. 4 and 2 is 6, 3 is 9, 10, 11, and 3 is 14, and another 3 is 17. So Kale is right on the edge between instructional and independent at a level 40. So He is in the 3rd grade. I feel solid that he's reading at grade level. He's just ready to be pushed a little bit harder to start peeling back some layers in his thinking at some higher level text. So the last thing that you have to think about is his focus for instruction. And I've already made a few notes on here to share with you. As an above grade level reader, I have to think about what Cale needs to continue strengthening his reading and writing abilities. It tells you in the student booklet on page 280, your continuum, that you need to choose 3 to 5 teaching or learning activities to focus your instruction on when you're working with Cale. What I usually do is I look at each section and I'll mark several. I'll put little marks by them, something for me to think about, and then I'll go back and I'll narrow it down to the 3 or 5 that I want to begin with. So let's look at the first section, reading engagement. You have 6 different options there of teaching points, and the one I marked for Cale is to introduce him to some reading materials from a variety of genres and purposes, just trying to broaden his choices whenever he goes to the library. The self-assessment goal setting and the oral reading fluency, the next 2, I kind of put together because Cale really didn't have a strong sense that he needed to set any goals to help him become a better reader. So the last one on the oral reading fluency is teaching him to heed punctuation, and the first one is using appropriate expression, or I'll talk to him about intonation. So I just drew myself a little arrow here that those will be the ones that I focus on, or that I would focus on if I was his teacher, and that would be his goals. His goal setting is to pay better attention to punctuation and use some intonation. Rate, I don't have any concerns with his rate right now, so I'm going to gloss right over that. On his accuracy and word analysis, when I went back to the running record, he self-corrected several times. So I'll probably just continue to praise him when I notice that he makes self-corrections, and help him with his self-monitoring, tell him that he is obviously paying attention to what he reads and he's stopping when it doesn't make meaning or if it doesn't quite look right. I might dig a little deeper there to see which one of those strategies it is for sure, but continue to reinforce that. Questioning and prediction, I feel really good right now with Cale on that, so I'm going to gloss over that. And I'm going to go up to that summary section. I think that Cale might need some additional instruction or some additional support in knowing how much to include in a retell, to build it up, give it some bulk. Not just do one from each section, but let's pick 2 or 3 things to share with somebody who might be reading your retell. That will be probably one of the big focal points of instruction for him. The other big one is the text evidence. When you go down to interpretation and reflection, he gave his answer, the ocean would be filled with octopuses. Well, why? It's because they have nothing hunting them. They're kind of at the top of the food chain, and go in that direction with him and teach him how to use evidence from the text when writing answers, because we know that's a super big thing in the Common Core. I was super impressed with his transferring, his decomposing from his science into his reading, and I'll be sure to praise him about that. So that kind of wraps up the scoring of the DRA. You might want to keep a copy of your focus of instruction in your conferring notebook or folder, however you're organizing that in your classroom. This will kind of help keep you on track as you are working with that student during conferring time and one-on-one. You can date points when you've made them, date how many times you've conferenced with the student on that, and it's just a good way for you to stay on track and help guide your instruction. If you have a student below grade level, on grade level, above grade level, that you're really struggling with being comfortable where you're scoring them on the continuum, please reach out to your mentor, reach out to colleagues, reach out to a reading teacher in your building, and sit down and score it together. give them a blank copy of the continuum and provide them with your running record and have them score it and have them look at the answers in the student booklet. And you can both provide your reasons, and that will just make you stronger. It makes each of us stronger when we problem solve together. So I hope you found this video helpful as you begin to give the DRA assessment or you continue in your quest to become better at doing it. Thanks.